The Halion Chronicles. The protectorate of Hellas stands at the edge of war. Titans stir, and ancient machines whisper in the void. Beneath the crimson grays of Thanatos, fate is cast in steel and circuitry. The Olympians walk among the mortals, spinning their schemes. Myth do not endure, they break, they burn, they fall. Only those bold enough to defy fate may earn their place among legend. Your cyber saga journey continues now. Bythoneion. The temple itself was an imposing structure, its facade adorned with intricate bas-reliefs depicting serpents coiling around jagged rocks. The ice seeming to follow Thrish's every move. Each block was meticulously carved with ancient runes. The central door, a massive slab of dark wood banded with iron, stood slightly ajar. An invitation or a warning. The scent of burning incense thickened as he climbed, mingling with the crisp scent of evening air. The steps were worn smooth by countless pilgrims' feet, each one etched with the passage of time and devotion. At the top he paused to take in the full majesty of the Bythoneion. Twin towers flanked the central building, their peaks vanishing into the twilight sky, adorned with banners bearing the sigil of the Bythoneion tool, an entwined serpent and rock. Besides the entrance staircase, an altar stood, burdened with offerings, flowers, pots, small trinkets, and, more disturbingly, the remains of the dead. Corpses wrapped in coarse shrouds or laid bare in solemn display had been placed there with reverence. The air was thick with the soft hum of chanting from a priest. His hands spread towards the earth. Thrish could see other priests in dark robes moving silently among the worshippers, their faces hidden in the deep folds of their hoods. At the entrance, the temple opened into a vast hall illuminated by the soft glow of hundreds of candles. The walls were lined with towering statues of gods and heroes, each one crafted with exquisite detail. The floor beneath Thrish's feet was a mosaic of colored stones, forming intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as he moved. His eyes were drawn to a particularly striking statue of a child, the deity's serpentine form rising from the ground, its scales glinting in the candlelight, and the upper body morphing into a bland-looking child. As he stepped closer, a group of temple guards emerged from the shadows, their expressions stern yet curious. "Halt!" commanded the lead guard, his voice echoing in the stillness of the night. "State your affairs here." Thrish produced the scroll, the high priest's seal glinting in the torchlight. "I am Thrish, pilgrim of the Yellowstone. I come at the high priest's request." The guards exchanged glances, their suspicion evident. The lead guard took the scroll, inspecting the seal before nodding. "Tell me, what interest does the high priest have in you?" Thrish met the guard's gaze steadily. "I don't know. Perhaps The High Priest will provide you with his reasons? If asked directly. He replied with practiced politeness, his tone calm but measured. He noted the flicker of irritation that passed over their faces, as if his words had struck a nerve. The very notion that a temple guard might dare question the motives of the High Priest was a step too far, and the discomfort in their stance confirmed as much. Their loyalty was one of duty, not inquiry, and Thrish had just brushed the edge of that delicate balance. The guard exchanged a look with the others and handed back the scroll, his demeanor softening. "Very well, follow me." Thrish quickened his pace as he followed the guard through the gates of the High Temple. Inside, the air was saturated with incense and the low murmur of prayers. A cloaked cleric awaited him, her form shrouded in shadows. She greeted him with a solemn nod. "Welcome to the Bythoneion, Pilgrim of the Shard," she intoned, her voice a soft whisper. "May I see your invitation?" He handed her the scroll, which she examined briefly before returning it. "Yes, the High Priest announced your arrival. Follow me, and please disarm yourself. Weapons are not permitted within these sacred halls." A flicker of unease passed through Thrish, but he complied, unbuckling his short cleaver and a few daggers with deliberate slowness, as if reluctant to let them go. The cleric watched him in silence for a moment longer than necessary. "Yes, yes," she murmured, with a faint arc of an unseen brow. "Now armed only with your charm." Thrish offered a crooked smile, unsure if it was mockery or dry reverence. "It's been sharp enough on occasion." "Let us pray it stays sheeted today, Bython willing, and your common sense intact," she said, turning with the weighty grace of a tomb door. Her movements were slow and deliberate, her bent back giving her the air of someone who had carried more than relics through her life. Beneath her hood, Thrish imagined the glimmer of a smirk. Then again, maybe it was just his own reflection being caught and returned in kind. They passed through iron gates into the temple's cavernous halls. The air grew cooler, and the flickering torchlight cast eerie shadows across the sandstone walls. Thrish marveled at the architecture. Arches rose like the ribs of a beast, each one carved with runes that seemed to pulse with life. The cleric led him through a series of small halls and narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence. They ascended a set of sandstone stairs, their worn steps whispering of pilgrims long gone. As they entered a secluded garden, Trish's eyes were drawn to a massive bloodwhip tree at its center, its dark leaves rustling with a sound not unlike a distant whisper. Twisted branches reached skyward, like the grasping fingers of an ancient, forgotten deity. Its bark was grim and rough, streaked with scars that shimmered like fossilized lightning. The leaves bore a deep silvery hue, glowing faintly as if infused with the pulse of something older than the earth itself. In the garden, the air was fresher, tinged with the scent of bloodwhip sap and the faintest trace of blooming flowers. The tendrils, thick muscular vines known as blood whips, hung low from the branches, dragging along the stone tiles with serpentine grace. They moved subtly, sinuously, curling towards the scent of life, a slow, questing motion, as if guided by hunger or dreams. Thrish watched one coil languidly around a discarded offering bowl, then retract slightly, unimpressed. He had encountered such trees before, far from temple gardens, in wild, unblessed terrain, where the blood whips grew longer and more curious. The fruits they bore, deep crimson with a metallic sheen, were sweet, intoxicating, and potentially lethal. Shamans revered them, not for the fruit, but for the psychoactive sap within the tendrils themselves. A single cut and the viscous secretion could induce visions of other worlds, or madness. Thrish had once tasted it by accident. He had spent a day speaking in dead languages to birds. Now, standing before this temple-tamed specimen, he felt a strange sense of reverence, tempered by unease. Even here, in sacred soil, the blood whip stirred like a thing dreaming of prey. Small stone benches were scattered about, inviting quiet contemplation. Thrish could hear the gentle trickle of water from a hidden fountain, its soothing cadence blending with the distant echoes of the temple. The sound called to something primal, clear, pure, like a memory of rainfall on stone. The water here was more than decorative. It moved with intent, filtered through rune-inscribed channels that fed into shallow stone basins nestled in mossy alcoves. It shimmered with faint motes of light, as if catching the last thoughts of dusk itself. It was clean, alive, unlike the dry husk of Gaia's refuge, where the spring had long since faltered into silence. The water flows here, but not at Gaia's refuge, Thrish thought, a twinge of bitterness stirring beneath his calm. Whatever force nurtured this oasis had chosen its loyalties well, or had been bought. He wondered who still whispered to the stone, who still fed the words etched into the channel walls. But the cleric gave him no time for questions. With a flick of her bony wrist, she turned and moved him swiftly to the other side of the garden. Beyond it, the temple's arch gave way to a grand hall, its vaulted ceiling soaring high above. The runes of the arches glowed faintly, casting a dim, watchful light. They passed a painting that caught Thrish's attention, a depiction of Es and Tes, ancient shamanic deities of the primal elements, locked in eternal convergence with Helios and Thanatos. It was a whirl of myth and force, where the raw animistic powers of earth and wind were drawn into the order and chaos of the Olympian pantheon. As the embodiment of stone, soil, and growth loomed large, her body coiled in earthen shapes, bone and root, moss and cracked clay. Tes, a fluid figure of sky breath and storm song, hovered beside her, wind made visible, dancing in spirals, cloaked in feathers and distant whispers. Their hands, outstretched, did not grasp so much as commune, with the greater energies, half prayer, half challenge. Helios blazed behind them, a golden spear in hand, his visage stern and distant. He radiated the solar law of Olympus, light as judgment, as clarity, as hierarchy. And across from him, Thanatos oozed from the canvas like ink and water, an engulfing figure of void and memory, his form fragmenting into a host of masks and whispers. The battle was not one of blades, but of ideologies suspended in symbols. The old world of communion with nature versus the celestial order imposed by the divine. Thrish had heard Lurkwa mystic chant of this very conflict, how the elemental spirits of Airs and Taz had once danced freely across the land, only to be captured and bound into Olympian form. Their shamanic essence was never fully tamed, merely painted over with marble and gold. And yet here, in this image, the old forms remained. In the chaos of motion and stillness, the painting told of rebellion and compromise, of ancient voices that still howled beneath the shrines and sanctums of Hellas. The cleric led Thrish down another series of narrow corridors, each more labyrinthine than the last, as if they were walking through the coiled guts of something ancient and dreaming. The walls grew closer, the light more elusive, and even the air seemed to hum with expectation, a resonance just below the edge of sound. Finally, they reached the door set into the sandstone like a sealed memory. Behind it, the temperature shifted. Warm mist kissed his fur, and Thrish stepped into a chamber shrouded in steam and lit by subtle rune glow. A circular pool lay at its heart, its surface still as glass, save for the occasional swirl that rose like breath from below. Around it stood 4 fractured sculptures, cracked and moss-crawled, barely lit, but unmistakable in their divine intent. Zeus, Athena, Artemis, Ares. He had seen them many times before, etched in the cold grandeur of marble temples across Hellas. But here, in the sanctum of the Bythoneion, something was different. As he approached, the space around him began to stretch and slow, as though the very rhythm of the temple's breath had changed. The air trembled with unseen geometry. The statues stirred. Their stone cloths shimmered into fine embroidered fabrics woven with constellations and serpentine patterns. Limbs, once locked in stony stillness, twitched, then moved with grace. The faces, once cold and idealized, became animate, not fully alive, but aware, watching. Fractures in the marble pulsed with soft blue light, and one by one the pieces healed with a fizzle glow, lines sealing as if time itself was being reversed. Thrish blinked. The gods were looking back. A low murmur reverberated through the sacred space as the gods turned their gaze to Thrish. Their eyes held the stillness of mountain roots and the depth of eons. Athena, luminous among them, stepped forward, not in motion, but in presence. Her eyes sparkled with cunning intelligence and something softer, foreknowledge. "Welcome, mortal," she said, voice soft yet cutting through the silence like silk on steel. Her hand lifted her insignia, a gleaming shield marked by the petrified gaze of Medusa. Zeus, Athena, Artemis, and Ares inclined their heads in solemn accord as Thrish drew nearer, his breath catching. Athena's smile lingered. "The queen must deliver in the east," she murmured, the words curling like smoke, etched with layered meaning. "May Gaia's force reach the heavens." At that, the air around him fractured, light broke into spirals, and the floor peeled away from certainty. The hall dissolved into a vision, as if time has sighed and let slip its veil. A luminous temple palace unfurled, rising amidst clouds of gold. Mount Olympus towered above, impossible and eternal. The warmth of a celestial sun bathed his fur, and winds whispered secrets older than names. It was not merely vivid, it was fractal. A loop within a loop, too perfect, too immense to be born of his own mind alone. The temple palace shimmered with celestial precision, every column humming with golden ratios that seemed to breathe. Helios crowned its summit, no longer just a blazing figure, but encircled by a fine radiant ring, a solar halo etched with impossible runes, slowly rotating like the mechanism of a divine timepiece. Around it, winged beings moved in intricate, silent patterns, their forms feathered with starlight and veiled in veils of drifting flame. They did not speak, but Thrish felt their presence as a rhythm, like being watched by harmony itself. Above and behind it all, the sky itself unfurled into something more. The clouds gathered in vast layered spirals, forming a mirage, vague and immense, of a strange old man with a beard like storm-split oak and eyes of swirling mist. He loomed impossibly large, not as a threat, but as an ancient truth, remembered by the wind. And the wind did whisper, an almost name, wrapped in breath and ash and longing. It danced past Thrish's ears, just beyond meaning, leaving behind the shape of a sound he would never quite forget. Thank you for listening to the Halion Chronicles. You journeyed until the end and likely enjoyed your travels through this episode. Let us know with a like and share it with fellow travelers of Halion. Never miss an episode, subscribe and turn on the notification to stay ahead of the unfolding saga. For free additional content, lore deep dives and more stories from Halion, visit our Substack at halionchronicles.substack.com.